The marble floors of Preston Academy gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as Evelyn Thompson pushed her cleaning cart through the grand ballroom. The annual fundraising gala had just ended, and the wealthy donors had left behind their half-empty champagne glasses and discarded napkins like breadcrumbs of their abundance. Evelyn had been cleaning these halls for 8 years, invisible to most who walked them, her presence acknowledged only when someone needed something wiped or removed. Tonight was no different, except for one thing that would change everything. Her daughter Destiny sat quietly in the corner, homework spread across a small table near the service entrance. At 13 years old, Destiny had grown used to accompanying her mother during evening shifts when childcare fell through. She was a brilliant girl who spoke 4 languages fluently, though most people at Preston Academy never bothered to learn this fact. They saw only the janitor's daughter, if they saw her at all. Destiny kept her head down, working through her advanced mathematics problems while her mother methodically cleaned the remnants of privilege from pristine surfaces. Marcus Sterling entered the ballroom like he owned the air itself. The billionaire technology mogul had donated millions to Preston Academy over the years, his name etched on buildings and scholarship funds. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. His Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor Evelyn had just polished. Behind him trailed several board members, eager to please their biggest benefactor. Sterling's eyes swept the room with the calculating gaze of someone always looking for his next opportunity or entertainment. That's when he noticed them. The black woman in the gray uniform, pushing the cart, and the young girl hunched over textbooks in the corner. Something about the scene amused him, perhaps the contrast between the opulent surroundings and their humble presence. He had been drinking, not enough to be drunk, but enough to let his worst impulses guide him. Sterling reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document written entirely in Mandarin Chinese. It was a complex technical proposal for his latest venture, something his translators had been working on for weeks. "Excuse me," Sterling called out, his voice cutting through the quiet room like a blade through silk. Evelyn looked up, startled. She had learned long ago that when powerful men called for attention, it rarely meant anything good. "Yes, sir," she responded, keeping her voice neutral and professional. Sterling held up the document, a smirk playing. At the corners of his mouth, "I have a proposition for you. If your daughter can translate this, I'll double your salary. Right here, right now." The board members behind him chuckled, some uncomfortably, others with genuine amusement. They knew Sterling's games, his way of demonstrating power through casual cruelty disguised as generosity. Evelyn's hands tightened on the mop handle. She knew this dance, had seen it before in different forms. Men like Sterling didn't make offers, they set traps. But before she could respond, Destiny stood up from her corner, her movements deliberate and calm despite her young age. "May I see the document, Mr. Sterling?" Destiny asked, her voice clear and confident. The room fell silent. Sterling's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised by the girl's composure. He walked over and handed her the papers, his smirk widening. "It's highly technical," he said condescendingly. "My own translators struggled with it." Destiny took the document and began reading, her eyes moving steadily across the page. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation and doubt. After a moment, Destiny looked up directly at Sterling. "This is a proposal for quantum computing integration in your new data centers outside Beijing. You're requesting governmental approval while circumventing standard environmental regulations by classifying the project under educational development. The technical specifications you've outlined here would require cooling systems that consume 3 times the water resources you've declared in your public statements." The smirk vanished from Sterling's face as if someone had wiped it clean with one of Evelyn's rags. The board members shifted nervously, suddenly very interested in there. phones or the ceiling or anything but Sterling's reddening face. Destiny continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. You've also included a section here about automated workforce reduction that would eliminate approximately 3,000 jobs while claiming to create employment opportunities. The mathematical models you're using to support this claim have been manipulated by changing the baseline variables. She set the document down gently on the table. Would you like me to continue with the financial projection section, or have I translated enough? Sterling's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment, his face cycling through shades of red and purple like a malfunctioning traffic light. The most powerful man in the room had been exposed by a 13-year-old girl, and everyone present knew it. The board members were no longer hiding their shock, some looking at Destiny with newfound respect, others glancing nervously at Sterling to gauge his reaction. The billionaire's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, his breathing becoming audible in the quiet room. That's not possible, Sterling finally managed, his voice strangled with rage and disbelief. You must have seen this before. Someone coached you. Destiny shook her head calmly. I've never seen this document before tonight, Mr. Sterling, but I have been studying Mandarin since I was 6, along with Spanish, French, and Arabic. My mother works 3 jobs to pay for my language tutors because she believes education is the only inheritance she can give me. Evelyn moved closer to her daughter, pride and protectiveness warring in her expression. Sterling's face contorted with fury. No one had ever dared to embarrass him like this, especially not a child, especially not the daughter of a janitor. His hand moved suddenly, grabbing a heavy crystal paperweight from a nearby table. The movement was so quick that no one had time to react before he hurled it at Destiny. The paperweight struck her on the left temple with a sickening crack, and she crumpled to the floor. Blood immediately began pooling beneath her head, spreading across the marble floor that her mother had just cleaned. Destiny. Evelyn screamed, dropping to her knees beside her daughter. The girl's eyes were closed, her body terrifyingly still. Blood seeped through Evelyn's fingers as she pressed her hands against the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. Someone call an ambulance, she cried, her voice breaking with terror. One of the board members fumbled for his phone, while others stood frozen in shock. Sterling stood there, the rage slowly draining from his face as the reality of what he had done began to sink in. The next minutes passed in a blur of sirens and shouting, and medical personnel rushing through doors that had only ever admitted the wealthy and privileged. Evelyn rode in the ambulance, holding Destiny's hand and whispering prayers she hadn't said since her own childhood. The paramedics worked with urgent efficiency, their faces grave as they monitored vital signs and administered emergency care. The hospital's emergency room erupted into controlled chaos as Destiny was wheeled in. Doctors and nurses converging like a well-rehearsed orchestra of salvation. For 3 days, Destiny remained unconscious in the intensive care unit. Evelyn never left her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, subsisting on vending machine coffee and the sandwiches that kind nurses occasionally brought her. The story had exploded across social media and news outlets. Security footage from the ballroom had been leaked, showing the entire incident in devastating clarity. The public's outrage was swift and fierce. Protests formed outside Sterling's office building. Hashtags demanding justice trended globally. Parents posted pictures of their own children, asking what would have happened if it had been their daughter. Sterling's legal team moved quickly, releasing statements about misunderstandings and unfortunate accidents. They offered settlements with numbers that had so many zeros they looked like mathematics problems. But Evelyn refused them all. She didn't want money that came with silence. She wanted justice that came with truth. She wanted her daughter to wake up and know that standing up for yourself, being brilliant and brave, wouldn't be punished by the world. She wanted things to change. On the fourth day, Destiny's eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was her mother's face, exhausted and tear-stained, but glowing with relief. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hoarse and confused. Evelyn sobbed, clutching her daughter's hand like a lifeline. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." The doctors ran tests, checking for brain damage, for lasting effects from the head trauma. Miraculously, Destiny's cognitive functions remained intact. Her languages, her memories, her brilliant mind, all still there. Wrapped in bandages but unbroken, the district attorney, Llewellyn made under massive public pressure, filed criminal charges against Sterling. Assault with a deadly weapon against a minor. Trial date was set, and the best prosecutors in the state volunteered their services pro bono. Sterling's empire began to crumble as investors pulled out, as board members resigned, as the public turned his name into a synonym for cruelty and cowardice. His carefully constructed image of the benevolent billionaire philanthropist shattered like the crystal paperweight he had thrown. During the trial, Destiny testified with the same calm clarity she had shown that night in the ballroom. She recounted the events without embellishment, letting the facts speak their own condemnation. When Sterling's lawyers tried to paint her as a coached puppet, she responded to their questions in perfect Mandarin, then translated her own words into English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as this young girl demonstrated an intelligence that Sterling had tried to destroy out of wounded pride. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all charges. Sterling was sentenced to 15 years in prison, his wealth unable to buy him freedom from the consequences of his actions. As he was led away in handcuffs, he passed Evelyn and Destiny in the courthouse hallway. For a moment, their eyes met. In Destiny's gaze was not hatred or fear, but something far more powerful, pity for a man so small that he needed to hurt a child to feel big. In Evelyn's eyes was the fierce pride of a mother who had raised a daughter strong enough to stand in truth. Preston Academy underwent massive reforms in the wake of the incident. They established the Destiny Thompson Scholarship Fund for gifted students from working-class families. They implemented new policies requiring respect and dignity for all staff members, regardless of position. Evelyn was offered a position on the board of directors, which she accepted with the condition that she could continue some custodial duties, because she believed in the dignity of all honest work. The school that had once ignored her now sought her wisdom. Destiny returned to school with a small scar on her temple that she refused to hide. She wore it like a badge of honor, a reminder that brilliance could not be silenced by violence. She founded a student organization called Voices Unheard that paired privileged students with working-class families to break down barriers and build understanding. She continued studying languages, adding Russian and Swahili to her repertoire. Universities around the world began recruiting her, offering full scholarships and opportunities that would have seemed impossible before. But the most profound change came in the quiet moments. When Evelyn and Destiny sat at their small kitchen table, no longer needing to be at Preston Academy after hours, when they could afford proper tutors and books, and even occasional vacations. When other young girls approached Destiny, telling her that her story had inspired them to speak up, to be brilliant without apology, to know their worth wasn't determined by their parents' paychecks. These moments built into a movement, spreading far beyond one incident in one ballroom. Years later, when Destiny graduated from Harvard Law School with honors, she stood at the podium to deliver her commencement speech. In the audience sat her mother, no longer in a janitor's uniform, but wearing a dress she had bought without checking the price tag first. Destiny began her speech with the words that had started everything. "If your daughter can translate this, I'll double your pay," said the billionaire to the black janitor. He thought he was making a joke. He thought he was demonstrating power. What he actually did was demonstrate the fatal flaw of underestimating people based on their circumstances rather than their capabilities. She continued, her voice carrying across the crowd of graduates and families and professors. My mother taught me that dignity exists in all honest work. That education is the inheritance of those who have little else to give. That brilliance can bloom in the most unexpected places if given even the smallest chance. Marcus Sterling thought he could silence that brilliance with violence. He thought wrong, because you cannot destroy truth by attacking the messenger. You cannot diminish intelligence by denying its existence. And you cannot stop the voices of the unheard once they realize they have something worth saying. The applause that followed wasn't just for Destiny. 'Twas for every parent who had worked multiple jobs to give their children a chance. For every child who had been told they didn't belong in certain spaces. For every person who had been invisible until they refused to be. As Destiny walked off the stage, she found her mother waiting in the wings. They embraced, two women who had transformed a moment of violence into a movement of change. They had proven that the most powerful translation isn't between languages, but between silence and speech, between invisible and seen, between accepting injustice and demanding better. Marcus Sterling watched the graduation ceremony from his prison cell, where televisions were tuned to news channels. He had lost everything. His fortune seized in civil suits, his reputation destroyed, his freedom gone. But perhaps the greatest punishment was seeing the girl he had tried to destroy soaring to heights he could never reach again. He had thought power meant the ability to hurt without consequence. Destiny and Evelyn had taught him and the world. That real power was the ability to transform hurt into healing, injustice into change, and silence into a voice that could never be silenced again. The story of that night in Preston Academy's ballroom became required reading in schools across the country, not as a tale of violence, but as a testament to resilience. Not as a story of a billionaire's cruelty, but as proof of a young girl's brilliance and a mother's unwavering love. It reminded people that education wasn't just about degrees and certificates, but about recognizing the fundamental worth and potential in every human being. It proved that sometimes the most powerful translation is when someone finally speaks their truth in a language the whole world can understand. In the end, Sterling had been right about one thing. He had doubled Evelyn's pay and so much more. But not through his contemptuous challenge. Through his downfall, he had inadvertently funded a future where Destiny could become everything she was meant to be, where Evelyn could be seen not just as a janitor, but as a woman of wisdom and strength, where countless other children could believe that their brilliance mattered more than their circumstances. The billionaire had made a bet against a black janitor and her daughter. He had lost everything. They had gained the world. The small apartment where Evelyn and Destiny had once counted pennies to make rent became a symbol of transformation. They had moved to a better place, but sometimes they drove past the old building, remembering the nights when Destiny studied by streetlight because they couldn't afford to keep the electricity on all evening. Remembering the mornings when Evelyn left before dawn for her first job and returned after midnight from her third. Remembering the dreams that had seemed so impossible they didn't dare speak them aloud. Now those dreams had names and shapes and reality. Destiny established a foundation that provided language education to underprivileged children. She named it after her mother, the Evelyn Thompson Center for Linguistic Excellence. The center operated on a simple principle that language was power, and everyone deserved access to that power. Children who had been written off as slow learners discovered they were brilliant in different tongues. Parents who had been dismissed as uneducated found their voices in new languages. The center grew from one location to dozens, spreading across the country like seeds of change planted in fertile ground. The night of the incident had started with the words, "If your daughter can translate this, I'll double your pay." said the billionaire to the black janitor. Those words had been meant to humiliate, to reinforce hierarchies of power and privilege. Instead, they had become a rallying cry for every parent who believed in their children despite the world's doubts. For every child who carried brilliance in their minds despite poverty in their pockets. For every person who had been told they didn't belong in spaces of power and prosperity. The translation Destiny had provided that night went far beyond Mandarin to English. She had translated potential into power, invisibility into influence, and a moment of cruelty into a movement of change that would echo through generations.